The Alcalde's Daughter and Her Christmas Lamp, by Mary Emily Donaldson Wilcox, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Long years ago, while the Mexican standard still waved over the Alamo, San Antonio de Bahar, the most flourishing Catholic mission east of the Rio Grande, rejoiced in an alcalde as famous for wisdom and virtue as for piety and goodness. Successful in his public enterprises, he was equally fortunate in his private relations, having a beautiful wife, an inviting home, and a brood of stalwart sons. That they had no daughter was much regretted by both, Doña Inez saying, "Boys serve to perpetuate the name and uphold the family honor. But it is the girls who, lifting the domestic burden from the mother's shoulders, and cheering, comforting the fathers, bless and brighten home." And when, in answer to repeated novenas of prayer and votive offerings, a daughter was born to them, they, naming her Maria Jesusa Pepita, gratefully dedicated her to the Virgin. Growing in beauty and grace and developing many lovable traits, Jesusa more than fulfilled parental hopes. Humoring, petting her father, preparing his pulque, filling his pipe, she became his daily companion and the idol of his heart. Don Pedro's office, adjoining the Alamo, then garrisoned by Mexican troops ordered to report to him and serve him when needed, was really the high court of justice, where the mission officials met to consider public matters, whether civil, religious, or military. His home, the most spacious and pretentious at the mission, was a one-story flat-roof adobe structure with about 15 chambers separated by quaint halls, corridors, and alcoves, and stood back of the Alamo amid extensive grounds, which, irrigated by a large acequia, teemed with rare, beautiful flowers, with orange, lemon, and citron trees, with vine-covered bowers and arcades almost hidden beneath clusters of luscious grapes. Some curious animals roamed in these beautiful grounds, and among these specially petted and cared for by Jesusa were Chihuahua dogs, tricky and playful, Maltese cats, soft-eyed fawns, white rabbits, and a canary bird which, as it tuned up when the matin and vesper bells rang, was supposed to be under the Virgin's protection. Though an earnest defender of the faith, Don Pedro was a devotee of those sports, cock-fighting, bull-fighting, card-playing, patronized by his associates. He had a cockpit in his yard for the rearing and training of gamecocks, where their mettle was often tried Sunday afternoons, and on his Salado ranch, where, in spite of frequent Indian raids, his family spent much time, he had a breed of superior bulls imported from Spain. Opposite the Alamo, on the slope leading to the river, stood a number of jacals tenanted by humble Mexican families, with one of whom lived a boy and girl supposed, from their fair complexions, blue eyes, and light hair, to be stragglers from the western white settlements, and who were known as the Americanos, the boy being called Cano, and the girl Cana. Though kindly cared for by their protectors, Mexicans are proverbially patient and indulgent with children, they never affiliated with their playmates, but, holding themselves aloof, seemed to be ever brooding over some secret sorrow. The boy, smart and ingenious, was often seen hanging round the Alamo, where, doing odd jobs for the garrison and making himself useful, he became a great favorite. Jesusa, generous, unselfish, sympathetic, was as popular with the mission juveniles as the alcalde with their elders. Noticing Cana watching her bird one morning, she invited her to come in and become acquainted with her pets. Children easily become friends, a certain freemasonry opening their hearts and drawing them together, and Jesusa, improving the meeting in the garden, became the generous patron of Cana, constantly making her presents and treating her to unexpected pleasures. San Antonio, though isolated from social and commercial privileges and almost exclusively absorbed in religious interests, was gay and sociable, fandangos, card parties, al fresco banquets, at which the famous Mexican dishes, tortillas, tamales, frijoles, chili con carne, dulces con fruta, were served in perfection, being of frequent occurrence. Holidays abounded, saints' days, national anniversaries, family fetes being carefully and elaborately observed, and at no place was Christmas celebrated with more pomp and solemnity. Two San Antonio Christmas observances, the Pastores and Christmas lamp, deserve special notice. The former was a species of dramatic performance intended to represent the Passion of Christ, and given every night during Christmas week. The latter was founded on the familiar legend that the infant Jesus, descending from his Father's heavenly throne to his Virgin Mother's arms, noticed a lighted lamp hanging near an humble home, and learning that it was intended to commemorate the guiding of the Magi by the Star of Bethlehem to his lowly manger, blessed the home and its inmates, leaving as visible marks of his favor some desired presents. On Christmas Eve, 1830 much excitement prevailed at the mission, it being announced that the alcalde had contributed a generous sum towards improving and adorning the hall to be used for the Pastores, which would be represented on a handsomer scale than ever before, and that Padre Ignacio, the San Fernando priest, who, officiating for many years at christenings, marriages, funerals, and hearing confessions, imposing penances or granting indulgences, thus becoming the alter ego of devout San Antonians, had, yielding to the solicitations of some influential San Fernando parishioners, consented to bless the lamps in church, thus giving them public consecration. Heretofore they had only been blessed privately. Many of them, a few being costly and ornate, were heirlooms, having belonged to the parents, grandparents, great-grandparents of their owners, and being endeared by tender domestic associations. Until a certain age, children were not allowed to handle Christmas lamps, their parents acting for them, and attaining the prescribed age, were required, by fasting and prayer, to prepare themselves for the ceremony, the failure of the holy child to notice their lamps and leave some mark of favor being regarded as the severest of rebukes. An importance somewhat similar to the assuming of the toga by Roman youths, or to the reception by sovereigns of royal courtiers, was attached to the function. The plazas de Islas y de Armas, adjoining San Fernando, generally crowded on afternoons with rancheros driving bargains or computing gains and losses, were filled on the Christmas Eve referred to with devout lamp-bearing worshippers, wending their way to church. Padre Ignacio officiated at the vesper service, then pronouncing the benediction, retired to the sacristy, where he laid aside his altar vestments, and, returning to the church wearing his plain priestly robe, stood outside the chancel rail and awaited the lamp-bearers desiring his blessing, who, advancing in line, knelt before him. Taking each lamp in his hand, he made over it the sign of the cross, and having blessed them all, said solemnly, Domine ad adjuvantem vos festina. It was an impressive scene, deeply moving to the lamp-bearers, who, returning home, lighted and hung their lamps on previously selected poles or bushes, where, shining like stars in the quiet skies, they seemed to reflect the simple, trusting faith characteristic of all sincere followers of Christ. The alcalde, deeply interested, burnished and prepared with his own hands his daughter's lamp, she being too young to do so herself. Then, lighting it, hung it, ignoring his own preference for a secluded nook near her window, in an obscure angle of an unfrequented corner of the Alamo, which she, as familiar with the Alamo as with her own home, had chosen. It happened to be just under the hall where Bowie, Crockett, Travis, and their brave comrades made their desperate stand some years later against Santa Anna, and where, sealing with their blood their devotion to liberty and independence, they enriched human annals with that sublimest of all sublime records. Picture a large barn-like hall without doors or windows, hard dirt floor, rough plastered walls on which some oil lamps and tallow candles and wooden brackets smoke and cast a dim spectral light. A platform raised about 2 feet above the floor and extending across the entire back of the hall serves as a stage, and some large, striped, Mexican blankets do duty as a drop curtain. The actors remain all the time on the stage. Those taking part in the scenes advance to the center, play their roles, then retire to the sides, where those not acting gather behind the curtain and are supposed to be invisible. There was no attempt at scenic effect, no applause, but absorbed, unflagging attention. In front of the stage were some large chairs, in which Don Pedro, Dona Inez, and other distinguished personages were seated. Back of the chairs were rows of benches occupied by well-dressed men and women, and in open spaces behind and on the sides of the benches, a motley crowd of women were wearing reboses, and sewing, knitting, or plaiting and combing their hair, and men wearing sombreros and drinking pulque, smoking or playing cards, sat flat on the floor. After rather a long wait, some musicians, sitting near the stage, sang to a guitar accompaniment some disconnected strains from church chants or masses. The curtain, parting and being drawn aside, discloses two men, the one fair, handsome, and well dressed, representing the angel of God; the other dark, ugly, with a club foot and horns projecting above a lowering brow, representing the devil, who have an excited dispute about the advent of the expected Redeemer. These two men appear in every scene. Then follow in regular succession the Annunciation, the Adoration of the Magi, Christ in the Temple, the Temptation, the Crucifixion, the Empty Sepulchre, all being taken literally from the Bible. In the last scene the devil kneels before the angel of God, acknowledges the divinity of Christ, and begs to be admitted to the community of the redeemed. The Virgin was personated by a young, beautiful, pure-looking woman; Christ by a handsome, refined youth; Pontius Pilate by a large, vulgar-looking man; Herodias by a saucy, bold girl; Mary Magdalene by a pale, forlorn-looking woman. There were occasional intermissions, during which the singers treated the audience to some rather sweet music. A cynic, marvelling that the managers of the Pastores should select scenes from a Bible they never read, might describe the performance as a travesty of a faith they would die to defend. Yet he would have to acknowledge the earnest interest taken by the audience to be significant of the human sympathy always aroused by the story of Bethlehem. The most pleasant of Christmas Eve duties, arranging the children's presents near or under the lighted lamps, followed the Pastores. Occasionally a lamp would be hung in a chapel or other preferred place not adjoining the family home, there being no danger of it being molested, a certain sacredness protecting both lamp and presents. Waking early, Jesusa crept on tiptoe from her little room and hurried to the spot where her lamp had been hung, trembling with glad expectancy of the beautiful things she hoped to find there. A light still flickered in it, but there was nothing beneath or near it. What could it mean? She stood a moment spellbound. Then, recalling some childish misdemeanor, she burst into tears, and falling on her knees, sobbed, "I have been wicked. I was not worthy of thy favor, Holy Child of God. Thou hast seen fit to punish me." Don Pedro and Dona Inez, hearing her leave the house, had followed her, wishing to see her delight at the pleasant surprises they had prepared for her. "Wicked, indeed," said he. "The angels in heaven are not purer. Some thief has despoiled you. We'll catch him, punish him, and force him to make restitution." Though slow to anger and prone to mercy, he was so incensed that he summoned the Mission Council to meet at once in his office to consider an important matter. A night guard at the Alamo testified that, making his rounds, he saw the white girl called Cana cross the street and go round the corner where the lamp hung; that later he saw her again cross the street and return home; but that, seeing her often playing with Jesusa, he suspected nothing and did not follow her. However, when relieved from duty, he picked up near the corner she had passed the dulces and ribbon end, which he there and then produced. The Mexican woman with whom the child lived testified that early that morning Cana had divided with her children a box of dulces, and had given her a bow from which the ribbon end had evidently been detached, claiming to have found them. Cana, when arrested and brought to the alcalde's office, denied bitterly any knowledge of either dulces or ribbon. Then, when cross-questioned, she became confused, and finally began crying. I knew where Jesusa meant to hang her lamp. I was curious to see what she had. Then, I don't know how or why I did it, I grabbed her things, carried them home, and hid them in the hole at the foot of the hill. Jesusa, who had been sitting on a stool at her father's feet, slipped to Cana's side and gently took her hand. "Don't cry, Cana," said she. "You've done nothing wrong. You knew I would be willing for you to have them." "Señor Alcalde," said one of the council, a tall, dark man with a loud, harsh voice, "justice and public safety demand the punishment of criminals, and I move that this self-convicted thief be fined 25 pesos, and in default of payment of said fine, that she be stripped and publicly flogged, then confined during Christmas week in the mission jail." Cano, who, hanging his head in shame, had crouched behind the door, here sprang forward, fell on his knees, and grasping Jesusa's hand, prayed, "Oh, Jesusa, don't let them strip and flog my sister." I have strong arms and keen eyes. I will work and earn the money to pay for the things Cana, poor little weak lamb, took. For the love of God, for the Holy Virgin's sake, don't let them whip her." Jesusa kindly pressed his hand, said, "Have no fear," then, throwing her arms round her father's neck, cried, "Padre mio, caro Padre mio, you have never refused a request. Don't let them harm Cana. Be quiet, my love." Then turning to the Junta, he said firmly, and Don Pedro knew well how and when to assume the air of authority, "I will pay this child's fine and give her the protection of my home. I also adjourn the Junta." He then summoned the Mexican with whom the children lived, and obtained from him the following story. "As has been my custom for some time, I went last year to the Comanche camp on the Pecos for trading purposes, and while there noticed two white children whose miserable condition excited my pity and caused me to ask the chief who they were and where they came from. Evading my questions at first, he finally told me that he had stolen them while on a horse raiding expedition to the Brazos, that going through the woods late one evening, near a house occupied by apparently well-to-do people, he saw the children gathering pecans, and creeping up to them, seized them, strapped them to the back of his horse, and fled, expecting to ransom them for a considerable sum. He sent an agent to make terms with the parents, but the agent returning, reported that the affair had created such a stir he thought it inadvisable to broach the subject. I proposed a trade, and he agreed to take for them a mule, a bridle, and a red blanket. I brought them home, intending to try for the ransom, but I did not know how to go about it." "Speaking of ransom, for how much could you, amigo mio, be induced to relinquish all claims to these children?" asked the alcalde. "Señor, you know me to be a poor man with a family to support, and needing money badly. Otherwise I would present them to your honor. Would you be willing to offer 20 pesos? Here are 50 pesos. Read and sign this agreement, which, as you will see, transfers to me your right and claim to them." Obtaining the requisite authority, the alcalde engaged a man known to be trustworthy to take charge of the Americanos, go with them to the neighborhood designated, hunt up their parents, and restore to them their stolen children. Supplying them with clothes, and giving to each one a well-filled purse, the alcalde said, on parting with them, "Never forget that you owe your deliverance from captivity and your restoration to home and friends to Jesusa, and remember her in your prayers." The leave-taking between the two little girls could not have been more affecting had they been sisters, and Cano's trembling lips and tearful eyes as he bade Jesusa good-bye expressed more eloquently than words the grateful emotion surging in his brave, boyish heart. In due time letters came from the rejoicing parents, invoking God's blessing on the kind-hearted, generous alcalde. Believing that their little ones had, lost in the woods, perished from starvation or been drowned in the Brazos, they had mourned them as dead. The night following the disappointing morning and the harrowing scene in her father's office found little Jesusa ready for bed betimes. While she slept, Doña Inez, entering her room noiselessly, hung above her cot a picture depicting the healing of Jairus' daughter, and opposite a scroll inscribed, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy," both scroll and picture being the work the nuns at the Mission convent, who, hearing of Jesusa's defence of Cana, aspired to play the part of rewarding spirits, and near by a doll dressed as a queen, and many playthings and trinkets calculated to please a little girl. Awaking and seeing the scroll, Jesusa supposed she must be dreaming. Then, noticing her other treasure, she sprang from bed, calling, "Come, madre! Come, padre! The angels have been here. See what they brought me. It must mean that the Holy Child smiles on me. You will go with me, will you not, carissimos, to church, and join me in grateful thanks for his divine favour?" And the adoring parents, unrestrained by thoughts of superstition or deception, encouraged their trusting child in her innocent delusion. Eventful changes fill the succeeding years. The Texas settlers in the towns and counties contiguous to San Antonio, finding the tyranny and injustice of the Mexican authorities intolerable, determined to throw off all allegiance to them and organize a separate independent government. The wise and effective means of resistance adopted culminate in the struggles at Gonzales and Goliad, where the Texans win decisive victories. Emboldened by success, they advance on San Antonio, defended by General Cos with a large Mexican force, and after 8 days of continuous skirmishing compel him to surrender. Entering the town, they garrison the Alamo with Texas troops, and hoist over it the Lone Star flag. The alcalde, loyal to duty, had rendered valuable assistance to the Mexican commander, and when the latter retreated, retired with his family to his Salado ranch, where, detained by Doña Inez's serious illness, he remained until the recapture of San Antonio by Santa Anna restored Mexican supremacy. His two eldest sons fell at Goliad, bravely defending their national colors, and the two younger ones were killed a year later in a skirmish on the Rio Grande. Returning to San Antonio the day after the massacre of the brave defenders of the Alamo, he was shocked at the atrocities committed by Santa Anna, and condemning them in unmeasured terms, kindly sought to alleviate the sufferings of the Texans still remaining at the mission. The defeat of Santa Anna at San Jacinto, and his subsequent inglorious return to Mexico, effectually relieved Texas from Mexican thraldom, though the alternate occupation of San Antonio by Texans under Hayes and Howard, and by Mexicans under Vasquez and Wall, resulted in prolonging chaotic conditions there for some years. Don Pedro, gracefully yielding to the inevitable, made no effort to exercise his official functions after the organization of the Texas government. Known, however, as the Alcalde, he was deferred to by both Texans and Mexicans, and always found acting with the upright and orderly, lost neither public respect nor influence. When General Sam Houston was elected and inaugurated President of the Republic of Texas, the citizens of San Antonio invited him to visit their town, and on his acceptance of the invitation they determined to give him a public reception to conclude with a ball and a banquet. The alcalde, asked to act as chairman of the reception committee, surprised everyone by agreeing to do so, and by advancing a handsome contribution towards defraying the expenses of the reception. The ball was given in the large hall of the Veramendi House, and proved a gratifying success. President Houston was accompanied by his staff, chief of which was a handsome young officer, Captain Osborne, who, enlisting as a private at San Jacinto, had been promoted on the battlefield for conspicuous gallantry. He was selected to open the ball with the alcalde's daughter, Don Pedro himself presenting him to her. Then, in the efflorescence of her maidenly charms, Jesusa was so lovely, her voice was so musical, her manner so gracious, that all hearts involuntarily crowned her queen of love and beauty. And Captain Osborne, could he resist such fascinations? Nous venons. Following the ball came a dinner at the alcalde's, then other entertainments given by hospitable San Antonians, at all of which Captain Osborne was Jesusa's devoted attendant. People smiled and said, "How well they suit! What a fine match it would be!" Captain Osborne accompanied the President back to Washington, the first capital of Texas, but returned to San Antonio in a few weeks, when the alcalde announced his daughter's betrothal to President Houston's chief of staff. One evening the lovers were walking together near the Alamo, when he asked, "Do you remember once hanging a Christmas lamp in the angle of that corner?" "Of course I do. It is one of the dearest of my childish memories." "And do you remember a little boy who once knelt to you in your father's office and implored you to protect his sister?" "Oh," said she, the light of memory restoring the boyish cast to his features, and recalling as if by magic that exciting scene. "Can it be? Yes, you must be. You are Cano!" "The dream of my life, Jesusa, has been to meet you again, and, meeting you, the most cherished hope of my heart has been to win your love." "Well, you have succeeded," she said archly. Of course Padre Ignacio, her lifelong friend and confessor, who had christened her and blessed her at her first communion, officiated at the nuptial mass, and who could wonder if, amid the decorations transforming the San Fernando altar into a mass of fragrant bloom, there hung a Christmas lamp, whose flickering light, though obscured by the glorious sunshine flooding the church, cast a mild benison-like radiance over the young couple, brave soldier boy and maiden fair, plighting their wedded troth there, a radiance betokening faith, hope, and undying love. End of The Alcalde's Daughter and Her Christmas Lamp, by Mary Emily Donaldson Wilcox. Recording by Philip Gould.
A Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Clark Moore, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap. When, out on the lawn, there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the lustre of midday to objects below. When, what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." End of A Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Clarke Moore. Read by Rosemary DeSapio.
The Wizard People by Clinton Scollard. Read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Adown the ways of winter, above the vasts of snow, with woven flame their sandals shod, through airy wastes by paths untrod, the Wizard People go. By day their feats are hidden, but night beholds their mirth, when in the abysses of the air their sorceries they flaunt and flare above a wondering earth. In vain the hilltops hearken, their lips no sound reveal, but ever on from arc to arc across the spangled depths of dark their pennons whirl and wheel. Whence come they? Who can answer? Whence go they? Who can tell? Flaming and fading down the night, a mystery, a dream delight, a splendour and a spell. Such are the Wizard People, the brethren of the Pole, And though man long has sought to gain Their secret, suns shall wax and wane Ere he shall read their soul. End of The Wizard People, by Clinton Scollard. Read by Newgate Novelist.